They said this would be the most colourful autumn in years. But what they didn't mention was that I'd need the sun to actually come out. You know, as photographers, it can be hard to deny that autumn is our favourite, most abundant season. The dramatic, changeable weather offers such a violence of vibrancy in both colour and subject that it's almost impossible to take a bad photo. With so many locations to explore and so much to photograph, it's a shame the window is so brief. This, then, is my search for autumn in 2025. You see, following a summer that apparently saw more sunshine than average, forecasters promised that the tree leaves and the foliage would be more vibrant and colourful than usual. Promise of glory then, and something to get excited about. My goal this year: find the perfect photogenic tree in a local picturesque woodland that doesn't have a forest floor that looks like a zombie outbreak. But good luck finding any of that in Northumberland. You see, although Northumberland is blessed with abundant woodland, only a small percentage of it is natural, and even less is what I'd class as photogenic. So in light of this, September saw me begin my search for suitable subjects. On a warm, early September afternoon with the sun poking through the trees, my first destination was Target Wood, a small area of woodland 1.5 miles northeast of Hexham. Frequent followers will know how much I love this place. It offers an unrivaled sense of peace within its isolated, cloistered confines, and it's where I've captured some of my favourite autumnal images. It was immediately obvious as soon as I stepped through that gate that, autumn had yet to arrive here. Seeing as I was here with a full afternoon to spare, I figured I'd actually explore this woodland fully for the first time. I was originally drawn to Target Wood because of this waterfall, and my photography is always centred around this smaller section to the south. Until today, I'd never explored the much larger section to the north. Now, I hasten to add that Target Wood is private woodland, and the owner has very graciously afforded me free rein of the place. Along the path running north beside the burn, I bumped into my first wonder. Stoic and silent, an aged gatekeeper standing guard over a path that branched west along the ridge to treasures beyond. Almost hidden beneath the brambles, ferns and nettles, this narrow-trodden path demanded exploration, and oh my god. When you're suddenly unexpectedly confronted with something you've spent so long searching for, and you find it in your local woodland, your favourite local woodland, there's just this initial combination of surprise and bemusement. Like, firstly, what are these trees doing here in the middle of all this? And then it becomes a little overwhelming given just how stunning an example they are of the kind of thing I've been looking for so long. Wow. I mean, it probably doesn't look great on my phone camera, but those are fantastic. Pressing further west, I then followed the path north past fascinating twisted structures, the occasional isolated birch secluding silently into the plantation, until there, on my left, was probably the most striking tree I've ever seen. You know when something just grabs you, commands your attention? In this clearing, all on its own, like it's being ostracised from the rest of the forest, is this stunted, twisted, gnarly old beech tree with the most amazing canopy of leaves. Given the clearing around it, the leaves appeared almost luminous against the half-light of the forest, a beacon, a way marker to what lay beyond. Navigating past a small barrier of limbs and boughs stood a magnificent line of towering beeches, in isolation surrounded by nothing but fallen leaves, their boughs arcing overhead in a wave of natural splendour. And then I turn around to return to the path and see there's another amazing composition which I never would have seen unless I hadn't wandered past that beech tree in the first place. Now, obviously, I'm not the first person to ever find these trees. I mean, the owner himself explained to me he'd planted them some 30 or 40 years ago to attract certain species of birds. I mean, God, there's even a campsite beside them. But my discovery of them just felt, because nobody else will look upon them the way I do. For me as a photographer, it's a eureka moment. They're the perfect subjects I can return to now over and over again. I'd finally found photogenic trees in a natural woodland setting and with a clean forest floor. Now, why the obsession with the whole forest floor thing? Well, imagine it's a painting, not a photograph that you're trying to create. You wouldn't paint that kind of thing, would you? Maybe the odd fallen log or fresh sapling that, it acts as a stepping stone into the scene. But the majority of Northumberland's natural woodlands that I've wandered around anyway are just awash with nettles, brambles, wayward saplings, wandering ivy, and just a basic mishmash of different species of tree. I'm not looking for homogeny, but the more minimal the better, simply because the eye prefers a minimalist, uncluttered scene. The brain doesn't want to have to work to discern shape and form from all that chaos. And besides, it's just ugly. For me then, this is the ultimate find, and in my favourite forest. Now I just have to wait for the colours to turn. One of the other things I especially look forward to in the autumn is a different kind of beauty, and it's the return of mist inversions. Following any spell of high pressure or clear skies, the first thing I do the night before is check the forecast. And there's one location deep in the heart of Northumberland where I've long been waiting to get my perfect shot. In a little crook in the road descending into Corkerdale, just west of the Simonside Hills, there's a lay-by with one of the most gorgeous views through the valley. A small win while I waited for the leaves to turn. As twilight gives way to gold, the mist turns a soft, luminous violet that leaches into magenta as the sun rises. Air descends off the hills, dispersing the inversion as the rising sun bathes the north side of the valley in a soft, ethereal light. Moments like this why I love being a photographer. Chasing inversions can be somewhat fickle because you need an ideal set of atmospheric ingredients to come together for an inversion to form. You need sort of high humidity, radiative overnight cooling, very light winds, and preferably clear skies or high pressure the night before. Any change in any one of those ingredients upsets the balance and you get no inversion at all. But after this, successful photography opportunities become increasingly scarce as the dreaded high-pressure gloom arrived and refused to leave. Persistent high pressure traps cloud and moisture at the surface. Without sufficient daytime heating to lift that moisture, you end up with days, even weeks, of boring blanket cloud. I had to make the most of any gaps in the cloud, so while waiting for my trees to turn, I explored other options. Northumberland's woodlands can be strange affairs because not everything turns at once. One woodland, might still be fully in the clutches of summer, while the next town over is just ablaze with colour. A stone's throw from Target Wood lies Allen Banks. Without fail, I come here every year to watch nature falling asleep again in spectacular fashion. Allen Banks is an ancient ornamental woodland set in the gorge of the River Allen. Autumn here is always stunning, but you have to time it right. Last year, I captured some of my best ever autumn photography here, and with the promise of a vibrant autumn, I'm at least hopeful of more of the same. If the sun can stay out for 5 minutes, which it almost did, the light became milky and hazy rather than overcast. Still workable, but autumn hadn't really arrived here either. the fungi had though. Fungi photography is a new one for me. An attempt to expand and do something different with my autumnal photography. And so this year is an introduction to the subject, basically. It's the hunt for whimsy. Knowing where to look is the first hurdle. Allen Banks doesn't have the forest floor where toadstools push up from below, so you need to look for rotting, rain-soaked fallen trees instead. Here, they grow in abundance. If the persistent gloom wasn't enough, the first storm in the season threatened to strip trees of their leaves before they could even turn. But it reminded me that autumn isn't just about colours. The arrival of Storm Amy, it allowed me to indulge in my other passion, storm photography. I've never been to Whitehaven before, but as Amy's impacts weren't going to be felt on Northumberland's coastline, I figured a recce to the west coast was long overdue. Amy's track and timing meant my haul wasn't as strong as my Storm Babette shots at Tynemouth. I didn't know the location, so wasn't prepared for the best angles, but this was a recce, and any photos I got would let me experiment with noir processing. That absolute unit of a harbour arm, it looked like some kind of medieval fortress, like Azkaban or something. It was just glorious for this, and it's a shame, the winds weren't strong enough to send the waves crashing over the top too often, but I loved the way those swells just slid up and along the wall. It's certainly given me plenty of ideas for the next time a storm hits here. I just need to remember to wear a pair of waterproof pants. Autumn was rapidly drawing on and the gloom persisted. I decided then to turn this into a positive. At this time of year, with the sun, it's now low in the sky, any bright direct light becomes a nightmare of wrangling contrast. Bright highlights, harsh shadows, along with scrappy woodland floors. Dappled light is something I prefer to avoid because it just bamboozles the eye. It gives the brain too much to work with. It has to work that much harder to see form and composition, and that's why we as photographers prefer haze or misty conditions in woodland compositions. It's not just because it adds mood and atmosphere. The mist reduces and minimises what is inherently a visually noisy environment. Overcast conditions diffuse light into a kind of soft overhead light box, far more sympathetic and complementary. If that stratus is thin enough, you sometimes get delicious soft shadows. And with such conditions prevailing, I headed back to Target Wood to check on my trees. He hadn't turned, but the fungi had arrived, popping up from the forest floor like a rash. Here, the lack of sunshine actually helped. This miniature unseen world benefiting from the diffuse softness to create an environment of whimsy I could extract in processing. That quality of light also allows you to use these little spotlights, so you can get that effect of the underside of the mushroom appearing to glow, because basically you hold the light right up to it, and through subsurface scattering, it basically illuminates the underside of the mushroom, which you then composite later in Photoshop. For my first foray into fungi photography, it was quite fruitful. I used extreme focal lengths on my telephoto lens, but I'm so hooked now that I may well invest in a decent macro lens and begin opening up these landscapes of a smaller world. A few weeks later, crossing into November as the sun finally began cracking through the gloom, I headed back to another favourite location. Dipton Wood is only small, at least the bits that interests me, but it has a couple of, great spots that are incredibly photogenic in what is now late afternoon light. A small burn snakes around the bottom of the embankment and exits through a gate into a field. Last time, I got the composition I wanted with water flowing through, but it didn't have that vibrant autumnal colour. This time, the colour is ablaze, but as all the aquifers are dry, So is the burn. And the sun is gone again. Come on, don't do this to me. So much of photography is about patience, especially when waiting for the light, but this year, autumn is really taking the piss. It finally emerges from behind the cloud, and the embankment blazes with colour. I love the long shadows being cast here, and the ridge behind creates a usable vignette along the base. Climbing the embankment leads up to a grove and a startling amphitheatre of colour. With the sun about to kiss the horizon, its soft, subtle gold filters through the surrounding trees, casting delicate pools of light and colour. With surrounding woodlands finally beginning to turn, I headed back excitedly to Target Wood, fully prepared to embrace the fiery blaze. Oh, come on! Will these trees ever turn? There were encouraging signs though. Those stubborn greens had subtly begun leaching into yellow. Other trees had begun their steady slide into autumn, just not the ones that concerned me. I did discover something else here though. Having explored the woodland enough now to have my bearings, I took a shortcut up a small embankment to a sprinkle of colour that caught my eye. There, almost hidden behind a phalanx of firs at the edge of a clearing, stood this resplendent tower twisting into the sky, its trunk splitting abruptly in two, each branch grazing the air like a pair of wings, its flamboyance muted by the featureless firs surrounding it. There is one hell of a photo to be had here, and so those colours had better turn soon because the winds are blowing and those leaves are dropping. I always like to keep an eye on social media, not just for those odd moments of inspiration, but it's to see what conditions are like at other locations. Further north in the foothills of the Cheviots lies the small village of Callaly, where the road leading to it is quickly becoming renowned for its tree tunnel effect. During autumn, it turns into a tunnel of fire. When the forecasters said autumn this year was going to be that much more vibrant, they really meant it, didn't they? I have never seen an explosion of colour like this before. With remains of a subtle inversion lingering in the morning air and the sun whispering promises of its presence, I wandered up and down the avenue hunting for angles and compositions to best convey this astonishing tunnel effect. The sun took an age to appear, barely climbing high enough to crest the ridge, but it created lovely stepped pools of light down the avenue, separating into layers what might otherwise have been an indecipherable cornucopia of colour. We're deep into November. Autumn's colours are finally abruptly exploding, as if held at bay all this time by the persistent, omnipresent high-pressure gloom. My last visit to Target Wood about a week ago showed some encouraging signs. Surely now my favourite trees have turned. Surely. I marched purposefully to the site of the Krakens, that area atop the ridgeline where those twin beeches reach majestically into the forest canopy. The sun will be up soon, and I want to catch them with their branches weaving with the mist in the pre-dawn light. I pass the gatekeeper, and there they are, stoic in the still air, the dissipating mist revealing their leaves turning a subtle gold. At last. I need to work fast. The mist is subtle, but it's enough to work with. There's a mood and an atmosphere here that's rapidly diminishing as the sun rises, and there are other trees to capture. After shooting the first round of images, as I'm looking around, analysing the scene, the most extraordinary thing happens. Unnoticed, the sun has crested the horizon behind me, and its first rays are shining through an open pocket of the woodland, and are painting the trees in patches of vivid coral. It's one of those moments where you're like a deer in the headlights. You don't know what to shoot. There's just this urgent need to capture it. And as quickly as that light appeared, it's gone. Right. So my next stop is the twisting tower with the abrupt midway split. The path to the clearing is flanked with firs, a morose guard of honour leading to what now appears to be a burning angel, its wings set afire by the rising sun. It's a profound sight. You've got this lovely soft pocket of light at the base of the tree. These dark shadowed uprights either side of the path leading up to it. And then this skylight flood up in the canopy that's creating a bit of an unwieldy contrast spread that's threatening to bleach out the colours. Because of that, I hate exposure bracketing, especially woodland scenes, because regardless of how fast your shutter speed is or how still you think the air is, you always get that halo effect, that sort of fringing around the leaves, because there's always some movement between exposures. And combining the HDR in either Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw is really pretty anyway. Having said that, I bracketed anyway just to make sure I've got enough detail in the darker areas at least to work with, and to make sure the brighter canopy area wasn't overexposing and the colours were still rich. Next I hurried to that solitary, ostracised beach, hastily grabbing shots of isolated flecks of autumnal colour. You can't see the tree from the path because of how it's recessed away from it, but around the corner, and my god, it's like the forest is on fire. Held aloft, the luminous, almost iridescent green from my first encounter was now replaced with a spectacular awning of gold. Pure, unchecked flamboyance held aloft by a gnarled, twisted trunk grasping at the earth. I know there are other trees left to visit, but this one rightfully demands my full attention.
Now, this is one of those trees I have no idea what to do with.
Again, there's a very obvious contrast spread here to deal with, but the darker areas don't concern me too much because it's that leaf canopy that's important. That needs to be pin sharp with perfect exposure because that's the story. I can do a separate exposure for the tree trunk and the forest floor in the background, and then I can blend all that later in Photoshop. But you kind of want that extreme contrast anyway, because it kind of creates a sort of yin and yang of one extreme tonal area trying to swallow the other. It gives the image a kind of calm energy. Satisfied I've caught it, my attention turns to that line of trees beyond. Stubbornly, resolutely, these kings of the forest still defiantly ward off the approach of autumn. To an extent. The farthest trees are now resplendent yellow, but the nearest remains tiresomely green. However, that tonal range creates a soft, enriching, subtle play of light. Autumn this year has once again taught me, as if I need reminding, that photography is all about patience and persistence. The fun of autumn photography comes from the woodland wanders and the exploration, and I can't believe the subject matter that I'd been searching for all this time was right under my nose. Capturing the majesty of trees and woodland takes a degree of skill I'll forever be learning. To go one step further and capture this magic, the perceived essence of such places. Sure, you can follow the rules of composition and colour theory and create an aesthetically pleasing image, golden section, rule of thirds, all that. But to reveal the story, to draw the viewer into your image, to be overwhelmed by nature rather than just contemplate it, that's something else entirely. There's something intrinsic and ethereal about it, an X factor, if you will. And I believe I found the right subjects. Now I just need to draw that essence out of them. Turning my eye to the forest floor this year has been both an unexpected delight and an eye-opener. Whimsy and imagination are part and parcel of this miniature world, and I look forward to seeing what it can teach me about the wider view of the giants surrounding it. This year was obviously just an entry into the format, but next year I'll come with fresh ideas and dedicated lenses. I look forward to scurrying about on the forest floor and clambering over logs again. if you enjoy this journey and want to see more, then please hit that like button and consider subscribing. I've got all kinds of tutorials and adventures in the pipeline, so your support will mean the world to me as I build and grow this channel. And until the next video, thanks for being here.